a man named Messiah appeared in the Middle East and gathered followers for new Advent. Is he sent by God, or is he a dangerous impostor intent on disrupting the world's geopolitical order? The story is told from the perspective of people from very different backgrounds who surround the mysterious man for 85 days. The enemy has laid siege to Damascus and a humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding. There is no food or water, and many people are killed by artillery fire. One day, two orphan teenagers, Jabril and Samir, see a man in yellow on the street. He advises people not to worry about the collapse of the city, because God foreordained it not to happen. Salvation approaches in the form of a sandstorm, the people flee under the onslaught of bad weather, but the preacher does not leave. He repeats that salvation is already near. A sandstorm disrupts enemy supply chains and forces the enemy to withdraw. The city is saved. FBI agent Eva Geller monitors every broadcast that happens, keeping an eye out for a strange man people call Al-Masek. She finds out that he has taken hundreds of his followers into the desert at night. By the bonfire, men talk about faith and religion. Al-Masek asks questions and is tough on people who don't want to think about his questions. All of humanity is now on the brink and must hang on in order to survive. After this conversation, the man left the people and stood for a long time looking at the sky, giving the impression that he was talking to God. The teens who came with him from Damascus remember him preaching while hiding in the basement. Suddenly Al-Masek called one of them, Jabril, and told him that every soul has its own star. He will see the light in the boy and soon Allah will give him a mission. Meanwhile, Eva begins gathering information to find out which officials know about the new savior. She soon learned that after walking 40 miles on sandy beaches, people had reached the Israeli border and stopped in front of the fence. Half of his followers believe Al-Masek tricked them into fighting, but he orders them to collect all their weapons and bury them. He climbed over a barbed wire fence, where he was arrested by Israeli border guards. Israeli Secret Service agent Eva Ramdahan is brought in for questioning. However, the arrested man did not reveal his real name and claimed to be a messenger. He calls out the agent's name and impresses the agent by revealing unexpected details of the agent's life that no one but the agent himself could have known. Evi Lam was particularly touched by the incident with the boy Messiah reminded him of. Evi Lam finished the interrogation, destroyed the videotape of the interrogation and left the room. He then went to his partner and asked if he had told anyone what had happened in the desert, but they remained silent. When Evi Lam gets into her car, she suddenly sees a man in the back seat with a bag over his head, and realizes it's a flashback to a tragedy long ago. Agents return to work early in the morning and are surprised to learn that Al-Masek has escaped custody. Meanwhile, in the small American town of Dili, local preacher Felix Aguero greets his congregation. Eva Geller flies to Israel while the FBI decides to help Israeli authorities search for and identify al-Mashir. At her insistence, Evi Lam is summoned to the office, but he cannot explain why he deleted the video recording. He is acting provocatively and does not understand why he should be held accountable to the American people. Meanwhile, an international conflict has broken out in the world. Those who were led by the Messiah to reach the borders of Israel are still starving after learning of his escape. They believe he will return one day, so they decide to stay. Volunteers are bringing food and water, and Messiah followers notice police looking for someone in the crowd. They felt joy like never before when they realized that Al-Masek had escaped. At the same time, Al-Masek preaches on the Temple Mount, speaking in oval phrases about the end of history and calling on those willing to submit to God's judgment to come forward. A boy steps forward, but the sermon is interrupted by the Israeli police who want to arrest the Messiah. A bullet hits the child who came out in front, and the strategy fails. People start screaming to ward off intruders. When Al-Masek laid his hand on the boy, he stood up unharmed and showed the public the bloody bullet. While people consider this a miracle, Al-Masek disappears into the crowd. Eva hears the news on the radio and asks to be taken to the scene. Muslims are also now discussing the Messiah's preaching and are very dissatisfied with their interpretation of Allah's teachings. The people in the camp can't understand why the newly discovered Jesus left them. Eva also notices the surveillance and the pursuer turns out to be Evi Lam, curious to know why she would interfere in things that don't concern her. But Eva doesn't give up. She examines surveillance camera footage and notices Messiah's strange disappearance. It is not yet clear who fired the shot. She tries to find the injured boy. Jerusalem cuts power to quell riots. Investigators arrive at the boy's address, only to find that the boy's family has left for fear of the crowd's attention. Reports of the Temple Mount incident are televised around the world, one of which is witnessed by Father Felix, whose daughter Rebecca dreams of running away from home. Meanwhile, Jabril sees a flashing light on the fence and walks towards it, while Eva spots Al-Masik in a photo sent by Jordan. Palestinian girls promise to help people by delivering food to the hungry. When Jabril goes to get help, a man appears and hits Jabril on the head and pulls him off the fence. That same night, the pastor's daughter Rebecca runs away from home, and her disgruntled father decides to set the church on fire. The man went to the building with a can of gasoline and a lighter. At that moment, a message appeared on his mobile phone, which he had left at home, that a tornado was approaching, and the pastor's wife went looking for him. As the tornado begins its perilous cycle, sirens begin to ring across the city, and residents rush to the only place of refuge, the church. When Father Felix called to hope his daughter was nearby, he suddenly saw Al-Masik motionless nearby. A video of Rebecca's rescue was later leaked on social media, but was intercepted by CIA agents and prevented from spreading. But how did the Messiah come to America? Federal agent will soon arrive at the crime scene. The man is completely destroyed, and only the church remains, and he is upset to see where Al-Masik is now. Al-Masik explains to the astonished priest that he has come here by the will of God. Felix is shaken because he was planning to burn down the building that ended up saving everyone's lives. At that moment, Agent Will enters and requests the Messiah. The priest swears to get Al-Masik out of jail, while Eva interrogates Jabril in the hopes of finding out the Messiah's whereabouts. But the boy does not know. The agent wants to understand why people follow the man unknown to anyone and promises to prove that there is no God. Meanwhile, Felix seeks help from a lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union, as everything that happened wasn't just a coincidence. Eva arrives in Texas to meet with Al-Masik, but his lawyer succeeds in barring the visit. The situation got worse when one of his videos showing what was happening in the city escaped his media block on social media and made its way to mainstream media. Alma's lawyers say the charges of illegal entry into the United States will likely be upheld in court, but she can be removed from the federal immigration detention center where she is being held. When the lawyer leaves the jail, Agent Will informs Eva, and she rushes to him. But during the conversation, Al-Masik, who knew her name and showed sympathy for her loss with the death of her mother and husband, again turned the situation in his favor. Realizing that he has an opportunity to help those who have followed him, he is ready to help those in her distress, including her. However, Eva does not believe his sincerity and escapes without noticing the recording device under her table. Eva returns to her hotel room and speaks to her superiors, who inform them that Israel wants to hand over Al-Masik and that the prosecution will seek permission to do so. Al-Masik was then tried and charged there, but he pleaded guilty and sought asylum. Eva goes to her lawyer and tries to convince her to stop fighting for his release in order to prevent the extradition of the man. If he eventually returns to Israel, he will be imprisoned. But the lawyer refused to talk about it. Meanwhile, Evi Lum again refused to reveal what happened during his erased interrogation. He has been suspended from the incident and has a hearing scheduled. At this point, Felix tells his wife that he is leaving home because he is needed by the Messiah. A large number of Al-Masik followers gathered in front of the courthouse. A hearing began, and the lawyer explained that the man could not return to Israel because he was being charged on religious grounds. But prosecutors allege the man is lying because he is a Muslim and does not attend the mandatory 5 prayers a day. The Messiah replies that he belongs to all denominations because they all live under the same sun. This causes a storm of emotions all over the world, even in high-level offices. A United States presidential aide tries to pressure a judge to deport an unwanted man, and the judge promises to think about it. Meanwhile, Samir finds his friend Jabril abandoned by Evi Ram in the desert and thinks it's a real miracle that he survived. The next day, the court made a shocking decision granting Mr. Masir asylum and allowing him to leave the court as a free man while Venerable Aguro's car waited outside. All over the world people are talking about the Messiah and believing in the miracles he will perform. Healers begin to gather in Dili. While the pastor tries to arrange lodging, Samir dutifully takes care of the Savior Jabril whom the pastor has brought with him, but Jabril is isolated from the people and lives in a small tent that only Felix can enter. One day a preacher dared to ask al-Mashiq about his plans for the future, but he said he did not know what would happen next. After all, Felix brought him here, which causes despair in the preacher's soul. He believed that the Messiah would act according to pre-planned plans. That same night, Agent Will visits Eva and shows her a recording of her conversation with al-Mashiq. He then showed her her book by one of the Wallace radicals on cultural terrorism repeating the words of the Messiah. Verbatim, it turns out that al-Mashiq is acting according to the scenario, whose purpose is to destroy the existing order. Meanwhile, refugees stranded at the Israeli border with no water or food are in trouble, and Samir soon begins to wonder where Jabril's strong faith comes from. He thinks it insane for his potentially fatal friend to refuse treatment, and accuses her of her abnormal love for the Messiah. One day, Eva's wife notices his car, which has been parked near their house for 3 days, and starts looking for the man. That's when the man arrived in Texas and bought a gun at a gun store. In Delhi, people gather every night in the hope that al-Mashiq will appear, but the man remains in the tent, leaving Felix in a state of confusion and eventually preaching to all who come. At this point, her 2 residents of Delhi finally locate and attempt to rescue their beloved dog who was crushed by furniture in the hurricane. When al-Mashiq disarms him and comes out of the tent, all the Rams approach him. The Messiah silently looks into the eyes of the man who killed him, and all the Rams lower their guns and watch the back of the man who walks away. The people notice the Savior walking towards the house, whereupon the man decided to shoot the poor dog in great pain. The boy asks al-Mashiq to save the dog, but he picks up a gun and shoots the dog, making the boy angry and distressed. And he leaves town. At this point, Eva Every caught up with Ram and he confessed that he wanted to kill Messiah, and at this point Messiah told the pastor's daughter Rebecca to come with her. Meanwhile, the refugees decide that the Savior has left them and decide to return to the city, but Jabril remains. In the morning, the young man dreams that his deceased mother becomes the Messiah and shakes hands. At the same time, Texas police ask the pilgrims not to come to Derry because it was completely destroyed. The people were satisfied with this and were ready to expel al-Mashiq and Father Felix. They write protest messages against false prophets on church walls. Meanwhile, Yamgulshari tells Eva the true name of the Messiah and that he has a brother who works at the university. The Messiah tells Father Felix that it is time to depart, convincing Felix that this is his destiny. The pastor decides to take his family with him, leaving his wife upset but her daughter delighted. Of course, Father Felix leads the ranks to follow the Messiah wherever he leads. The number of followers is steadily increasing and will reach hundreds soon. Eva follows al-Mashiq back to Texas and one night sees him calling from a street payphone. At her request, Agent Will asks for a copy of the call. The next day, the column continues to take breaks along the way. The pastor learns of a border crisis that still awaits Palestinian refugees. Rebecca snaps a photo of Messiah standing on a Washington street sign and posts it on social media. In the morning the convoy departs and Felix learns from the post that the road leads to the U.S. Capitol. At the same time, Eva researches everything she can find about the Saviors, and comes across a book al-Mashiq quoted during her interrogation, information that the Saviors studied at the same college where the notorious terrorist Wallace taught. Professor Wallace hacked the stock exchange and fled to Russia during a criminal investigation. This means that the alleged assault case is entirely within Eva's jurisdiction. The giant pillar arrives in Washington, al-Mashiq goes to the Lincoln Memorial, and Jabril sees a vision of his late mother. And when the Messiah al-Mashiq speaks of the unity of the peoples of the world around him, Jabril suddenly stands up as if listening to his speech. Al-Mashiq asks you to look at yourself and your neighbors. Jabril strips naked. The Messiah will stand in front of the people and look at them, and finally the people will look at him. It's too late to kneel. Time is up. Jabril walks towards the border. Al-Mashiq heads for the water. Jabril kept running until the barrel of his soldier pressed against his chest, and al-Mashiq ran through the water. The Israeli army withdraws and Jabril leads the refugees. Hundreds of astonished spectators follow the Messiah's journey, captured on mobile phone cameras. The world is in turmoil after witnessing the miracle of al-Mashiq, and the Ministry of the Cause of the Saints is also considering the incident. Everywhere there are clashes between supporters and opponents of the newly created Messiah. People send money to Father Felix, who wants to use it to build a church in Al-Mashik. Meanwhile, Jabril reaches the West Bank and is greeted as a liberator. The refugees are taken to a secluded house where they are fed and housed, but Jabril openly declares his allegiance to Al-Mashik and is separated from the rest of the refugees. Meanwhile, Eva reports her findings to her boss. Messiah has a track record of fairly long ties to banned organizations, most notably Wallace, who is now hiding in Moscow. U.S. officials are concerned about al-Mashik's popularity, and the White House Chief of Staff has called on the CIA to do everything it can to discredit him. But Eva said to her, "This is not just terrorism. This is a new level of destabilization in society." Meanwhile, society is increasingly discussing the Messiah. People are divided into those who definitely believe him and those who think he is a false prophet. Felix preaches on behalf of all and reminds people of the importance of faith. The Lord specifically chose them, and it is important at this time to understand why. A woman with a terminally ill child sneaks into Messiah's hotel and the man agrees to take the girl, but only one. However, his room is monitored 24 hours a day. Meanwhile, young refugees begin to study various sciences, with a focus on religion. She comes to see Jabril in person to understand the depth of his faith, but the young man confidently replies that he believes in a Messiah. Meanwhile, Eve discusses Messiah's water-walking feet with Aviram. After all, Jesus did the same. He gathered followers by performing tricks. The man was impressed and she spoke like a real Jew. Agent Will continues to monitor Messiah's room, and one day he sees a girl knocking on her door and praying for her healing. However, the man soon understood the true purpose of their visit. A girl came to seduce him. He reveals her soul by attacking a woman selling her body, resulting in her soul melting to death. The girl admits that her visit has been paid for and tears at the touching words of the Messiah as she confesses God's eternal love for her children. Agent Will, who was watching the scene, had tears in her eyes when she heard her words. At this point, Rebecca bursts out of her parents' room and sees Messiah escorting the girl out of his room. The girl ran away and was caught up on the street by al-Mashik. He tries to describe her special place next to him, and the girl shares her observation that the world seems to be on the verge of something great. The prophet turns to Rebecca and asks her to do something unimaginable. And she promises to do whatever he asks. Meanwhile, the CIA succeeds in locating al-Mashik's brother, revealing that they belong to apparently different faiths and died young. The boys were raised by an uncle who was a professional illusionist, and al-Mashik always loved being the center of attention. Uncle was a stern man, but he taught the boys everything he knew: English, reading and writing, and most importantly, how to perform tricks. At this moment, someone put a black bag over al-Mashik's head as he entered the room. The man finds himself in the Oval Office of the President of the United States, standing before the head of state and demanding the withdrawal of American troops from all over the world. The politician was shocked because he spoke of the president's sincere convictions. This is simply not possible, as U.S. troops are deployed as peacekeepers, and without them there would be chaos in the countries they control. However, the Messiah lists the names of the countries and cities in which the Americans waged war. It offers the president a chance to go down in history as a true peacemaker and save the world. He says the story is over and the world will soon begin again. Meanwhile, Eva learns that al-Mashik was in a psychiatric clinic several years ago and is attending the university they studied at. But the director doesn't remember anything of particular note other than the thesis. Eva goes to the archives, but there are no papers. In Jordan, Sheikh Jabril shows a newspaper article about the miracles of al-Mashik and asks him to speak at an upcoming celebration. The boy must become a new generation of leaders fighting for Palestinian independence. The next day, al-Mashik announces a meeting with the president to the media, infuriating Felix, who thinks he should have been informed. The president faces similar attacks. He is heavily guarded against this freak, but he attends meetings himself. But the man interrupts all conversations. He must think of people first. Angry, Felix presses his complaint against al-Mashik, but the letter suggests that he should kneel before him if he truly believes that he is the savior. The preacher ponders this as the Messiah leaves the room. Meanwhile, Agent Will definitely starts believing in al-Mashik and quits his job. Meanwhile, Eva is receiving the call log she requested. That same night, every Ram al-Mashik inquires about her family and asks if she would like to walk on water again. But the guy just smiles and answers and asks the reverse question, why isn't all the RAM working? Agent cannot answer. The president speaks to al-Mashik again, telling him that he has no more time to think. At that moment, water begins to seep into the president's feet. When the man wakes up, he learns of unprecedented floods that are devastating the coasts of America. Afterwards, Reverend Higaro's daughter tells him that al-Mashik came to Texas for her, not her father's. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem the jailer confesses that he was the one who released the Messiah from prison, and that he was not all rams. That same night, the girl hired by the presidential aide to ensnare al-Mashik repays in full the money she received in return. She doesn't care if he's real or not. It is important for them that he is a very good person. Meanwhile, the president visited the affected areas and, in addition to providing material assistance, called on the people to pray and ask for help from the Lord. At the same time, Pastor al-Mashik's wife asks why she chose her family. He said faith is everywhere and wants the same thing that the Lord wants, the flood. Meanwhile, in Jordan, Sheikh was teaching Jabril about the nature and independence of Palestine. It is very difficult for the illiterate to memorize unfamiliar words, Sheikh argues. During this period, his friends were also strongly influenced by religious beliefs. Meanwhile, Pastor Felix asks a famous showman to include al-Mashik in his show. After all, it's your chance to speak in front of an audience of millions. Eva checked all the numbers on the list and found one that al-Mashik called frequently and had been talking to the caller for quite some time. Meanwhile, the President of the United States is forced to make a tough decision after being informed of the deployment of Russian troops to the Latvian border. On this day, Eva meets al-Mashik and tells him what he knows about his mental hospital diagnosis, Messiah complex, and his uncle's sorcerer. She believes someone is taking advantage of him, and she promises to find and arrest the puppeteer. He admitted that he knew Wallace, and that Wallace was still his friend despite the terrorism allegations. Felix then tells al-Mashik about an invitation to watch TV and he agrees, but only if the pastor brings his daughter. In the evening, Eva talks to her father and she is surprised to learn that her father believes al-Mashik to be the savior of the end times. Meanwhile, it turns out that the Badia complex is a terrorist training camp and Samir is preparing for the role of a suicide bomber. Meanwhile, Eva decides to take action on her own and she dials her number, which al-Mashik keeps calling. In response, she hears Wallace's voice. Their theories about the connection between Arma-6 and terrorists have been confirmed. However, during the conversation the men deny all their conclusions. Unfortunately she doesn't understand what's going on. He is the least dangerous of the two. The woman turned over his book again, read the dedication on the title page, and received a revelation. Meanwhile, the president is demanding an analysis of the complete withdrawal of U.S. troops from Eastern Europe. Eva goes to her boss. Wallace's book is actually the opposite, as it is the work of al-Mashik. Authorized terrorists are disciples of the Messiah. It's finally time to appear on TV. Al-Mashik and Rebecca prepare for a performance at the mosque. Many devotees come to hear Jabril's first speech. The boy is very nervous, but the chief is nearby and guiding him. The host warms the audience before the Messiah appears on stage, and Samira is also ushered into the mosque. But just before going on stage, Messiah left the studio and got into his car. Meanwhile, Samira puts on a self-destruct belt. The audience demands the appearance of the Messiah, and Rebecca appears on stage. While Alma drives the Sikhs in every ram's car, Jabril begins preaching about the Messiah at the same time as Rebecca. Teenagers repeat his words to the audience, "We are all one human being." I pushed and looked into Jabril's eyes. He doesn't feel like pushing the button. However, Samir's leaders remotely activated the bomb vests. Rebecca suddenly passes out in the studio. A massive explosion rocks the mosque. The story goes back several years. When every Lam and her partners kidnap, interrogate, and kill the underage son of one of the organizers of the bombing that killed every Lam's mother. However, it turns out that the boy wasn't the man's son at all, which still haunts the agents to this day. He personally drives her to her airport and hands her over to Israel. Aid given to victims after mosque bombing. Jabril, unconscious, is carried off on a stretcher. The same thing happens with Rebecca. Meanwhile, Eva Gala learns that al-Mashik has been kidnapped. The CIA is tracking his plane, not knowing it was all on the orders of the White House advisor. Her Rebecca wakes up and tells her father that the Messiah is gone and will not return. Jabril wakes up in the back seat of a truck to find a dead man next to him. The fingers on the bottom of his palm twitched as he squeezed his hand. Eva learns that the plane carrying Messiah has taken off from a government airport, and her boss tries to pressure her boss into figuring out the plane's destination. He threatened to tell the president everything that happened, thereby cornering the head of state. At the same time, Heaven's Al-Mashiach speaks to every ram and persuades him to clear his conscience. Because God still loves him, people always choose between good and evil, and the last thing they see before he dies is this boy's face. Meanwhile, the presidential aide decided to release a folder containing Al-Mashiach's real name and documents to the press, highlighting his mental illness and the fact that he was raised by an illusionist. Severe turbulence is occurring over the plane. An explosion occurs in the tail and each Aries sees the dead boy's face, but whose face is covered by the Messiah's hand. At the command center, Eva is informed that the aircraft signal has disappeared from the radar. She realizes that tragedy has happened. Television news revealed the Messiah's true name and biography, causing confusion among Al-Mashiach followers. After hearing everything, Felix leaves the hospital. Jabril also watches Messiah's brother talk about his ability to perform magic tricks. Eva accuses the president's aide of destroying the diplomatic plane, but the president's aide warns him to keep his mouth shut. The woman is overwhelmed that the entire operation has failed and she cannot prove anything. Meanwhile, Father Felix arrives at the church and lights it. He doesn't believe in anything anymore. Meanwhile, Eva Lum wakes up among poppies and sees the Messiah above her head. Then a local boy appeared before him, offered him a bottle of water, and enthusiastically explained that the man had performed miracles, a ram that was undoubtedly dead, and another man, with gray hair. He was revived to the top of his head. Crawling flies. Then when he touched them they came to life again. Agent watches in amazement as his partner bows her head to the completely unharmed Messiah standing in front of her. The film tells the story of the coming of the prophet Messiah in the modern world. It's an entertaining and accessible film about the deep thoughts that Al-Mashiach expresses in conversations with everyone from an illiterate boy to the President of the United States. On the one hand this is a strange combination, but on the other hand it is very understandable, as the Messiah claims that we all walk under one sun.